Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. As you've probably seen, SUVs or sports utility vehicles are incredibly popular, not just here in the UK but everywhere on earth. It seems everybody has one. So what I thought I'd do today is a list of the top 8 SUVs you can buy for under £10,000. I've tried to keep this list interesting. I've tried to choose cars that I would actually drive myself, so they're not just all extremely expensive to run or extremely reliable or extremely cheap to run. There's a good mixture, I hope. So see what you think. Number 1. The Kia Sorento. Specifically now the Mark II Kia Sorento, so 2010 onwards. I'm not talking about the early models, which were okay, but they were quite rough and ready, farm vehicles. The Mark II were much more car-like. They were available as a 7-seater, so they're incredibly practical, and I think they're a good-looking car. They're well-proportioned, it's not too big, not too small. It's quite a handsome-looking car, I think. If you go for a high-spec KX3 or KX4 model, it'll be four-wheel drive and it'll have absolutely everything. So it'll have heated front and rear seats, it'll have a panoramic glass roof, it'll have sat-nav, it'll have a reverse camera. Alright, it's never going to be as luxurious as something like a Range Rover, but it will have all the options on it. I would personally go for an automatic model because I think they just drive a whole lot better than the manuals. Even with prices as high as they are at the moment, £10,000 will get you a nice 2014 model with sensible mileage. If you're looking for one, try and get one from 2014 onwards because there was a slight facelift and they just look a bit better. And you get things like keyless entry and keyless start. They all have a very reliable 2.2 litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine, which is good for about 35 miles per gallon around town and about 45 miles per gallon on a motorway run. So they are incredibly cheap to run. I've bought and sold loads of these over the years, and the only single problem I've ever had was a dodgy fuel sender unit. In fact, it's a bit of a funny story this. I'd sold this 2012 Kia Sorento to a customer, and I was arranging to deliver it one evening. Now, coincidentally, it was an evening that I was supposed to go to watch Man City at the Etihad with my dad. So we'd arranged to drop this car off on the way, and then carry on to football. Incidentally, it was Yaya Touré's last game. So as I drove down the motorway, all of a sudden it just coughed. So I thought nothing of it for another mile or so, then it coughed again and spluttered. Next thing, the whole car just died. So I pulled over onto the hard shoulder of the M60 and had to wait about 3 hours for the recovery truck. So I missed the game, missed Yaya's last game, and then the customer was calling me, wondering where I was, so I had to tell him that I'd broken down, so he wanted a refund. It was a complete mess. And it turned out that I had a quarter of a tank, or I thought I had a quarter of a tank of fuel in it, and I didn't. So, dodgy sender unit. But apart from that, they are very reliable cars. Number 2, the Lexus RX 400h. I know this is a car that might be getting on a little bit in age, but they are terrific cars, trust me. It ran from 2005 until 2009, and £10,000 will get you a late 2009 with about 50 or 60,000 miles on the clock, and it will get you a high-spec model. If you've got 5 or 6 grand to spend, you'll get an 06 or 07 with about 100,000 miles on the clock. So there is something for all budgets. They're cheap to run, cheap to tax, very reliable, and they're a nice place to be. Under the bonnet you get a 3.3 litre petrol V6, along with an electric motor and some batteries. So it'll do about 30 miles per gallon around town, which for a big, heavy, luxurious SUV isn't bad at all. And it'll do about 35 miles per gallon on a motorway run. It does have a slightly annoying CVT gearbox, but the positives still outweigh the negatives. So I would still opt for one of those if you're looking for a large SUV. And it's also ULEZ compliant, so if you live in the Greater London area, it might be a good choice. Number 3, the Volvo XC60. Now, I'm not a big fan of the XC90, the XC60's bigger brother. I just don't think it's a very good car. But the XC60, on the other hand, I think is. They're good looking, it's not too big so it's not too difficult to park. It's only available as a 5-seater, not a 7 like the XC90. But still, lots of people don't need those extra 2 seats. For £10,000 you'll get a 2012 model, a 2.4 litre diesel automatic, with around 100,000 miles on the clock. Now, you might be put off by that sort of mileage, but again, trust me, on a Volvo, that's nothing really. As long as it's been looked after, which the chances are with a Volvo it will have been, because Volvo owners are quite fussy and fastidious. And they're very good, very reliable cars. The only thing you do have to watch out for, they have a very annoying electronic handbrake, which works the opposite of how you would expect it to work. So it can catch you out sometimes, but once you've got used to that, they're great cars. The leather seats are some of the most comfortable seats I've ever sat on as well, so you won't be disappointed with that. They also come with things like heated seats and some nice extras that just make a car easier to live with. If you go for an automatic, which is what I'd recommend, I would definitely recommend getting the gearbox serviced. It'll set you back £200 or £300, but it will definitely be worth it in the long run because it will just prolong the life of the car. On to number 4 then, the Volkswagen Touareg. I think these are great value for money. Again, £10,000 will get you a Mark 1, but a facelifted Mark 1 in a good spec, something like an Altitude model. So 10 grand will get you a 2009 3 litre turbo diesel Altitude, which is quite a high spec, and I still think they look good. I'd avoid the early 2.5 litre turbo diesel engines because I think they were all torque and no trousers. You just seem to rev it and nothing really happened. But the 3 litre turbo diesel is much better. It's the same engine that they use in the all kinds of Audis and even Porsches. That generation of Touareg was only available as a 5-seater, so you don't have the added practicality of, say, a Q7. But still, you get a large car there that can easily accommodate 5 adults with a big boot. Running costs will be higher. You'll be looking at about 25 miles per gallon around town and about 35 on a motorway run. And here in the UK, the road test is in one of the highest brackets. That'll set you back about £585 a year. But still, when you think about the value that that car represents, you can't go wrong, really. And they also make great towing vehicles. And you could have bought it with a V10 turbo diesel engine, which I think is probably worth going for, just because that kind of engine will never ever be made ever again. Before we continue, I've got to say a big thank you to today's video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark. If you haven't heard of Surfshark, they are a VPN service provider, which is something that you ought to use whenever you're online because it just helps protect your data and your details from being stolen by cyber thieves. It encrypts all your details both to and from your devices, and it hides your IP address, so it just keeps you safe while you're online. It's also handy if you use lots of streaming sites such as Netflix, because you know when you try and find your favourite TV show or movie, sometimes it's not available in your country or region, but with Surfshark you can change the location settings so that it thinks you're in a different country, and then all of a sudden you're able to watch your favourite shows, movies, whatever you like. That's what I mainly use Surfshark for, and it's come in really handy. It just means that while I'm on holiday in Spain or wherever, I can still watch my favourite shows from the UK, and vice versa. In addition to that handy feature, it blocks malware, phishing, ads and other kinds of nastiness, which in turn can speed up your bandwidth and make your device run much more smoothly. You can download the app very easily from the App Store and use it on an unlimited number of devices. It's cheap and easy to use. We're all online a huge amount of time these days, and you just don't know how much information you're putting out there that anybody could get a hold of. So you definitely need to check out Surfshark. Especially if, like me, you frequently use public Wi-Fi spots such as at train stations, airports, fast food restaurants, that sort of thing. The last thing I want to do is get my bank details hacked, but thankfully with Surfshark, touch wood, that just hasn't happened. So if you use the link in the video description below, which is surfshark.deals/hypeautos, Surfshark will give you 83% off and 3 months totally free. And we're not talking a huge expensive commitment either. Works out about £1.35 a month. So if you do online shopping, online banking, or if you just want to stream your favourite show from another territory, definitely check out Surfshark. Right, on to number 5. The Subaru Forester. I know they're not very exciting, but they are great cars. I filmed with one recently and I was really impressed by just how good it was, how practical it was, how sensible it was. It just did everything really well. You completely fly under the radar, nobody even knows what one is, so you certainly won't stand out from the crowd. Nobody knows how much money you've got, nobody will try and steal it from you. It's just a totally anonymous car, but a really competent one. They're good off-road, decent on-road, they're decent to drive, they're very practical, very well made, and very reliable. They do a diesel and a petrol. Now the petrol I've heard is a little bit more reliable, but the diesel will be cheaper to run, so that's entirely up to you. They make a manual and an automatic. Now the manual gearbox is a little bit notchy, but it's better than the alternative because the automatic is a horrible CVT box that just makes a racket. So I would say you're probably better off going for a manual. £10,000 will get you a decent spec 2014 model with sensible mileage on. So for that kind of money, it's an awful lot of car. It's one that you could run for about a decade without worrying about it. Number 6, you might think I've lost the plot here, but hear me out. It's the Porsche Cayenne. Now specifically, a 2008-2009 3-litre diesel, because this really won't break the bank. It's the same engine in fact as was in the Touareg that I mentioned 2 or 3 cars ago, and it's a great engine. I've always liked this era of Cayenne. It's the facelift Mark 1. I just think they've aged really well. I still think they look good. So for £10,000 you'll get a 2009 with around 100,000 miles on the clock. And again, with good service records, you can't go wrong. You get a sporty but safe, practical family car with a Porsche badge for 10 grand. I really can't see any negatives. The interior is quite luxurious and well made. The exterior I think looks good. I know some people think it's hideous, but I personally think it looks quite good. And in terms of running costs, around town you'll get around 25 miles per gallon, and on a motorway run you'll get 35 or 36. So it's not that expensive to run. Unfortunately here in the UK it does sit in the highest tax bracket, so that will set you back £585 a year. But still, I still think the positives outweigh the negatives. They're also good fun to drive because it feels sporty. It feels like you're in a sporty saloon car rather than a big wallowy 4x4. And they're good off-road too. Number 7, the BMW X6. Now this is a bit of a controversial one because they were never very popular cars, were they? But again, I think it's aged really well. I still think they look good. And 10 grand will buy you a 2010 model with around 100,000 miles on the clock. So again, this is a car that's got an awful lot of life left in it. All you've got to do is find a good one with good service records, service the gearbox, continue to service it on time, and you've got a decent, solid, reliable car. I'd avoid the petrols and go for the 3 litre straight 6 turbo diesel because that's a terrific engine. And again, if you can find one with around 100,000 miles on the clock, that's good for 200,000 miles without any major bills. Off the road they're a bit useless, but on the road they're very sharp and sporty to drive. Practicality wise, they're not the most practical car because of the sloping roof, so the boot space is slightly impeded. But for most people it won't really matter. It wouldn't bother me anyway. It greatly depends what you'll be using it for. Number 8, this is the last one on the list. Now this is probably the most sensible one on the list as well. It's the Hyundai iX35. You might think this is a very boring car to feature on this list, but I couldn't not include it. I've had dozens of these over the years, and every single time I get in one, I'm just always impressed by them. I'd go for the 2 litre turbo diesel rather than the 1.7, because you just get a bit more power. If you go for a high spec model, they have literally everything. Sunroof, sat-nav, reverse camera, heated seats in the front and in the back. They're just a really well thought out car. The infotainment screen is also very good quality, and everything's laid out very sensibly. I'd go for the manual gearbox rather than the automatic, and you'll get very good fuel economy. You're talking 40 miles per gallon around town, and around 55 on a motorway run. So very cheap to run. And also here in the UK, the road tax is only £155 a year. I think they're fairly attractive cars, they're nice and easy to park, they're very practical, very sensible, and reliable. So you can't go wrong. And I couldn't not include the iX35 on this list. Well, I hope you found that list helpful. I've tried to choose cars that I would actually drive myself. Not that I'm the messiah or anything, but I thought I didn't want to be a hypocrite and recommend something that I would turn my nose up at. So all of those cars I would be quite happy to use. Thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. When I've checked my analytics, almost 75% of my viewers aren't subscribed. So just go back and double check and make sure you are, because I would greatly appreciate it. So don't forget to check out Surfshark, I'll leave the link below. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Cheers guys. Oh, by the way, in the comments, if you've got any suggestions for these kinds of videos, you know, the top 10, top 8, top 6, all that sort of stuff, just let me know below. And then if I think it's a good idea, then I'll try and get it made. So yeah, cheers guys. I'll see you next time.